Pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of a flower. Pollination is called self-pollination when pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the stigma of the same flower, also called autogamy, or to a different flower on the same plant, also called geitonogamy. Pollination is called cross-pollination or xenogamy when the pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the stigma of a flower on a different plant of the same species. Nature favors cross-pollination because cross-pollination ensures genetic variation, and genetic variation is important for evolution. So, flowering plants have developed many devices to encourage cross-pollination and discourage self-pollination. These are also called outbreeding devices. Some contrivances which ensure cross-pollination are dicliny, dichogamy, heterostyli, hercogamy, self-sterility. Dicliny is the condition when only either male or female reproductive organs are present in one flower. It is observed in dioecious plants bearing unisexual flowers. For example, flowers of some species of Cucurbita and Euphorbia are unisexual. Dichogamy is the condition where the anther and stigma mature at different times, thus avoiding self-pollination and promoting cross-pollination. It occurs in monoecious plants with bisexual flowers. Where the stamens mature before the stigma, as in the jasmine and the sunflower, the condition is called protandry. And the condition where the stigma matures before the stamens, as in the rose, is called protogyny. But in flowers where the anther and stigma mature at the same time, a contrivance called heterostyli ensures cross-pollination. Heterostyli is observed in the primrose flowers. In heterostyli, the flowers have styles of different lengths. Flowers have two forms, pins and thrumbs. A pin flower possesses a long style and short stamens, and a thrum flower possesses a short style and long stamens. In hercogamy, a physical barrier develops between the pollen and the pistil of the same flower in order to discourage self-pollination. Hercogamy is observed in milkweeds and orchids. The pollen is packed into hard masses called pollinia. They are located such that they can be removed only when a pollinator is leaving and can be deposited only onto the next flower which the pollinator visits. Self-sterility is a condition wherein the pollen of the same flower or a flower from the same plant fails to fertilize the ovule. It is a result of the chemical interaction between the pollen and pistil after pollination. Tea flowers are self-sterile. When pollen falls on the stigma of a flower, some chemical interactions occur, which help the stigma to recognize the pollen. If the pollen is compatible and of the same species, the stigma will promote post-pollination events. This is called compatible pollination. If the pollen is of the wrong type, the stigma won't allow the pollen to germinate. The complex recognition factors in the flower prevent incompatible pollen from fertilizing the flower. This is called incompatible pollination. In compatible pollination, the pollen grain, after falling on the stigma, germinates to form the pollen tube. The male gametes reach the egg cell lying in the embryo sac through this pollen tube. Incompatible pollen won't be allowed to germinate, or if it germinates, the growth of the pollen tube will be arrested along its pathway to the ovule. The series of events from the deposition of the pollen on the stigma till the entry of the pollen tube into the ovule is called pollen-pistil interaction. Knowledge about pollen-pistil interaction helps plant breeders to manipulate this interaction even in the case of incompatible pollinations, and achieve the hybrids they desire. Plant breeders cross different species and sometimes even different genera of plants to achieve their desired characteristics in the resulting hybrids called commercially superior varieties. Artificial hybridization is a part of crop improvement programs. Emasculation and bagging techniques are generally used for artificial hybridization. The removal of anthers is called emasculation. It prevents self-pollination in the flower. Emasculated flowers are covered with a bag to avoid contamination of their stigmas by unwanted pollen from the surrounding area. This process is called bagging.